Was Sadiq Khan lying? Is he misinformed? Is he ignorant? Or did he genuinely just not know this was going on in London?
He's taken this weird stance where he said, I don't really know what you mean by a grooming gang, and all of that exchange, which is now, that's just going to haunt him.
Has that been something that people have been saying to you, we're not willing to speak about it because I don't want to be accused of racism?
Sadiq Khan refused to even say the words grooming gang. He said, your words, not mine.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Expresso. I'm JJ Anisiobi, and today I'm joined by my colleague, the Express's investigations editor, Zak Garner-Purkis. Now, Zak's work has been dominating the media the past couple of weeks thanks to his illustrious investigation into London grooming gangs. Scandal, shame, and justice for the survivors. Zak, thank you for joining the Daily Expresso today.
Thanks for having me.
First things first, just start by walking us through what you found in your huge investigation.
Well, where do we start? I mean, essentially, the starting point of it all was the Mayor of London and the Met Police apparently saying that London didn't have any grooming gangs. And the whole process of this story, this ongoing story, has been to test that and, well, essentially getting to the point where the Metropolitan Police have now said that they're reviewing 9,000 cases for, potentially, grooming gang activity. I mean, the process in terms of where it started for us was we did a story with a police whistleblower who's now spoken to a lot of other media outlets called John Wedger, and he brought in his notes from the time from Haringey police station that demonstrated quite clearly that there was kind of group-based child sexual exploitation that was going on, and it's just run from there. We then went and have just found mountains of evidence that this was happening.
So it's complex, it's sensitive. What drew you to grooming gangs in London specifically?
I mean, on a personal level, like I'm from London, and the more that I started to look at this, I was like, how has this been allowed to happen here? And how have the people that are in charge been able to say we don't have it? Because the quote that we kept coming back to was one from Sadiq Khan, which was, Susan Hall asked him, do we have any grooming gangs in London? He said, no reports and no indication. That has just stuck with us, and that has been the kind of thing that we've been looking at to test that. And it's not just a bit the other way, it's incredibly far the other way. I mean, it's not 9,000 cases the other way. And again, that's just the tip of the iceberg. That's just going back to 2010.
So was Sadiq Khan lying? Is he misinformed? Is he ignorant? Or did he genuinely just not know this was going on in London?
It's a question for Sadiq Khan, isn't it? I mean, I think he's got to know it's all going to come out now. Like now this train is on the tracks. It will come out. Like everything is there. There is now, we're not going to stop looking at it, but it's not just the Express that are looking at it anymore. I mean, this was like the Times, the Mail, the Sun, everyone is looking at this. So more will come. I mean, in terms of like, why did he draw that line in the sand? I have no idea. It would have been the easiest thing in the world for him to just say, yes, it's really serious. I'll look into it. In fact, actually, he would have been in the strongest position to say, I don't care, where the people are coming from or what they're doing to get stuck into this. I just care about the victims. Instead, he's taken this weird stance where he said, I don't really know what you mean by a grooming gang, and all of that exchange, which is now, that's just going to haunt him. And and look, he came out last week and spoke on ITV, and he did look like someone that regretted acting in the way that he did. But what would have been, and the survivors that I speak to, what would have been nice is just retract, don't, apologize for how that went. But I mean, that's getting into like the kind of politics of it. And I think we want to stay out of that. We want to stick to what's in there, where's the evidence, what does the public record say?
You looked into several London boroughs. What differences or even similarities did you find when you were doing this investigation?
I mean, so I think when we think about grooming gangs, right, it is the pattern. That's how we need to understand this, and this is the way that we approached it in terms of what are we looking for. And when we everything that we found, we checked with Maggie Oliver, who was the first detective who blew the whistle on this and has become, she's the country's leading expert on grooming gangs. So what is the pattern? Well, the pattern is a group of men who have bad intentions towards children will cynically target vulnerable children. Now, oftentimes that's children in care. So that will be them waiting outside care homes. Sometimes we were finding just schools that were in, that were maybe in a bit of a bad area where the kids, again, might be outside, they might be vulnerable. They might be in a position where they're more susceptible to someone that's going to buy them takeaways, that's then going to give them alcohol and cigarettes and all those type of things. It's that pattern, and I think that's the focus of it, because people start bringing, there starts to become a thing about ethnicity. The grooming gang is what is the pattern that is well established, whether they're up in Dundee or Doncaster, right? It's how they were acting and what they did, and to claim that wasn't going on in London, although it seems to be kind of muddied now about whether they weren't denying it, was just ludicrous. And we've proved that.
Speaking of schools then, if we talk about schools and social services, what role can they play in spotting, or in fact, as it has been, I guess, missing signs of grooming in kids?
Well, the problem is like still just going on. I mean, the cases that we're looking at, they start, and this is probably only because we can, like, this is at the moment how far we're going back, but it's kind of from the 90s right through to present. This stuff still goes on. The reports that we've still got still blame these kids for getting involved in it. Now, one of the things that Sadiq Khan and the Met bring up correctly in some regards is this thing to do with like drug dealing and how that plays a role in it. And definitely there is a blurring of the lines, but I think where councils have maybe lost it is they're focusing on this criminal exploitation. They need to think about kids being sexually exploited because it's still going on.
You've spoken to survivors, as you said. What was that like emotionally? How do you approach a victim of grooming?
So the approach that I always take is I don't own your story. I'm just, when it's yours, you tell me, and it's if it's beneficial to them to do that, because we've gone down the road with lots of survivors about being like, okay, is this the moment that you're going to speak publicly? And lots of occasions we've not actually gone through, or got to the point where they have done that because they're not ready to do it and it wouldn't be beneficial to them. Because this is the worst thing that ever happened to most of their life is trying to recover from this. So if they're going to come forward and put the kind of spotlight on themselves, you got to think about what that means. But in terms of hearing the stories and the impact on me personally, I've said it before. This is the worst stuff that I've ever dug into as a journalist. Like the reports, just reading the reports where you read story after story after story of 11-year-olds being sexually, and it's not just that they're getting raped, it's that when they report it, I was going back through one of the cases this morning in Croydon, and it's assessing it's a girl that took her own life, and it's talking about when she was 11, the social services were talking about her seeking out older men and being sexually active with older men when she was 11. And look, when you go over that stuff, it does, it takes its off. And that's also, I think, why when you've had Sadiq Khan, Mark Rowley, that have read, apparently read or looked at some of the same stuff that I've looked at, and they have then stood up and kind of had this, we've not got a problem or it's not happening here. That's what makes it so shocking.
So how much of the problem lies with policing then? And what is the undercurrent with that? Is it denial? Is it a class issue? Is it under-resourcing?
I think, look, the police have a lot to answer for, but I don't want it to get twisted, because I've interviewed lots of the police officers who work in sex crimes, and I would say they're some of the biggest heroes of anyone that anyone that I've spoken to, because what I've just described in terms of the stuff that I'm reading, they have to deal with all of that. They'll be dealing with like hundreds of cases at any one time. That is the problem, really, which is it's like it's such a massive problem, and the resources are not there. And when the resources aren't there, then all of the things that you just mentioned in terms of like prejudice against victims becomes more acute, because if you've got 300, some of those Sapphire officers, they've got like 300 cases at a time. Now, how many of those go to court, right? Very few. And if you're prioritizing what goes to court, what do you have to start doing? You have to start looking at victims, and you have to start going, well, who's going to be credible? And who are the victims that are going to be the least credible? Well, they're normally going to be, the children that are, on the fringes, in care, this type of a thing. And so whilst the police do need to take responsibility, I think it comes down to resource, and that they need the money, and because part of the problem is that they'll be sending junior officers to deal with these children, and they might not have the experience or be able to properly do what they do what needs to happen for them to get justice.
So you touched on ethnicity being an issue, and I don't want to turn this too political, but we do in this country associate grooming gangs with British Pakistani men, even though we know that the biggest grooming gang ever in the modern day, I think, was in Birmingham, and it was all white people. Some of them were women. Why is it that when we talk about grooming gangs in the UK specifically, it's so highly associated with British Pakistani men?
I think, right, it's because, and I think the media needs to take responsibility for this, which is the victims were traditionally ignored. And so the only way that this topic actually used to come up was just with this kind of the racialized element of it, right? And, it popped up through that and with that. And then it kind of dies down again, and then it pops up with that. The problem is that there is not enough consistent focus on the victims and on these type of crimes, and then it just becomes a kind of a back and forth with that. In certain towns, that was obviously part of it, and I think like that, there's been really powerful bits of journalism about that. But the point is, and especially where we shouldn't get dragged into in London, is making it about that. So when the mayor or the Met, when we ask them about grooming gangs, we never bring that into it. Number one, because we don't know at this stage, right? So for them to then answer us with that, I think is very dangerous.
Just staying on that for a moment, the police have been criticised, especially in places like Rotherham, and social services criticised and accused of being afraid of being called racists, and that's why they weren't willing to investigate. So, did you find that in your investigation that actually was true, and especially here in London? Has that been something that people have been saying to you? We're not willing to speak about it because I don't want to be accused of racism.
I'd say we don't know at this stage, but what concerns me is that Sadiq Khan refused to even say the words grooming gang. He said, your words, not mine. Now he's said grooming gangs, he's brought up ethnicity, and he's said the ethnicity of the perpetrators and the ethnicity of the victims. That starts to go down the road where if there is an issue, if it does turn out that you have these situations, that it becomes harder for people. And I think it's like, let's focus. Yet London is, the evidence that we're finding, these groups of perpetrators they're mixed. It's complex. But I don't think that we should rule it out that you aren't going to have other elements within it. What I think is really, really damaging is, why are you talking about the ethnicity of the victims? I mean, it's just like, that is really like, I don't understand why you would bring that into debate.
So investigative journalism, as I know it, it's expensive. It used to take a lot of manpower. How have you managed to keep this story going at the Daily Express?
Have I managed to keep it going?
Yeah.
I mean, what drives this story is the British public want to know about it. Why have I been able to focus on this? Because it will, because there's interest, there's high levels of interest, and that's why that motivates me. Like whilst because it can shift quickly, right? And it has in the past. We've seen repeatedly this topic comes up. There's a high level of interest in it, and then it just dies away. And we have to make the most of it and try and actually get as much out there that can benefit the survivors as possible whilst there is that level of interest. Not that I am going to stop looking at it, but I think that's the simple answer to it. Really.
And what does it say about our national newspapers and modern day media that none of the other papers have done a big campaign as we have at the Daily Express you, essentially one man, have pushed this and made videos and done the reports about it. You've done all the hard work, and only then, after you have broken it, now everyone else is now saying, "Oh yes, we should look into this issue."
Well, I should say it's not just me, because I collaborated with a colleague from My London, so it was. Okay. So I think it's it's much fairer to say I picked this up and I was like, I was so confused. I was like, why has this not been properly looked at? And one of the first things I did was I called up Callum from My London, because he's the crime and courts reporter. So I'm like, well, if anyone's going to have a clue, it'd probably be him. And he was like, well, I've been looking at this too, and we joined forces. So yeah, first thing was a team effort. In terms of like, why was it not looked at previously? I've got no idea. It's mad. You've had documentary makers, some of the best in the country. You've had newspapers, some of the best journalists in the country, going up to Rotherham, going up to Rochdale, digging into it, going into the council meetings. Why are you not doing that in Tower Hamlets? Why are you not doing that in Westminster, Hounslow, Hillingdon, all these places? Why are you not doing it in your own backyard? And what's really interesting with it is when you speak to some of the people up north, they're like, oh, if this was happening in London, you'd be all over it. And it's like, well, no. No.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe there is a kind of arrogance that people don't think that it I don't know. Honestly, it baffles me. But at the same time, I got to take responsibility as well, because I did a story quite a few years back with a London grooming gangs survivor, and we did the whole thing about her experiences, and I should have gone on and just dug more into it there. Like, it wasn't like I knew it existed because I'd spoken, that was always why, oh yeah, no, this is a thing. But it was only recently, and I guess it's from the hard stances that the Met and the Mayor took, that I was like, no, I need to drive this harder.
Has this investigation changed the way you view your city?
I'm
not a Londoner, but I've been here for almost 20 years, and parts of London that used to be unsafe for me to walk through are now gentrified, and everyone's rushing to live there. But there's still parts of London that I would say to my wife, I don't want you walking down this street after 6 p.m.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because what you're tapping into there is like the city has changed massively. It's not a place. It's really hard when you're from London to be like to have it be homely in the same way as it would be for other people from other towns, because it transforms so much in like 3 years, let alone 10, 15 years. In terms of the stuff that I've found, and when I've been investigating this, I mean, I think this is one of the things for me personally, which is it makes me revisit, think when I was at school, and seeing, and I think it's not just London, but it's it's Britain as a whole, and the way that we used to, or how girls that were on the fringes got treated, that I remember, and what all our attitudes to it was. And it's it's just part of London's past, but it's not just London, it's the rest of the country. Where I think the real shame is kind of about 10 years ago, when all the Rotherham and Rochdale stuff came out, that London didn't just go, we can deal with our shit, right? because there was an opportunity there. Instead, they just went, no. And then they doubled down and were like, this couldn't happen here.
Yeah.
And it's just mad. It's not honest. You know, it's kind of, you see this stuff with the housing where it's like people can't find places to live and they'll turn and with a straight face say, we're in a golden age of house building or opportunity in London. It's like, no, like, what? Like, how can you say that? And that's the same feeling I think that I got with this. And I feel like a lot of Londoners would as well, where it's just like, what, are you serious? You can't, like, don't mug us off.
So do you think now the authorities are going to take it more seriously and we're going to actually see results? Or is this going to be just a cycle of outrage and then inaction, some politicians saying we're looking into it and then nothing happens for another few years?
We keep the heat up and don't allow them to do that. I mean, the thing... Look, the police have come out and look, credit to them, gone, okay, we're going to look at 9,000 cases. They've also said, and I think completely fair enough, we don't have the resources to properly do this. Like, how could they? That is the right response. I didn't expect it to happen this quickly, that we would do these stories and then they would say, okay, we're actually going to have a look at this. But I guess it's like, we need to demand results from this. There is the right thing. Because ultimately, inquiries or not, what do we want to see? We want to see perpetrators put behind bars and we want to see victims supported. Yeah. I think that's... I challenge anyone that isn't like, you know, those aren't the two priorities. I mean, the third thing is also anyone that's been involved in covering it up, they need to face justice too. But I don't think we're at the stage yet in London where we can say, okay, we know that this has happened there or not. But the first point is, you know, is what the police are doing. So
would you say there's any legislation or some reform that could come in now and it's going to massively help the victims?
What I've said this on other podcasts that I've spoken on. I think the way to deal with it, and again, this is my personal opinion, but I've looked at the results of that previous inquiry and what they did to London, which was the last big inquiry into child sexual abuse. They spent nearly 200 million. They gave a load of recommendations, like hardly any, you know, it's basically ignored. Tower Hamlets that got called out, they just ignored everything with it. So the two things that I would do is, if you're going to spend a serious amount of money, set up an independent, like, elite police team that is just the, you know, your grooming gangs unit that just goes after and finds the perpetrators and also finds the people that covered up, and then spend money supporting the survivors. Because, you know, the other problem that you get with all these inquiries, they go to the survivors and they go, come here, tell us everything that's wrong, you know, all of this. They don't think about supporting them. If you're going to, like, you know, and just chew them through the kind of media machine and just knock them about like a political football, spend the money on supporting them and getting them justice.
Finally, are there any parts of this that are untold that you're still chasing?
Oh, yeah, loads.
Yeah?
Yeah, keep watching.
Zak Garner-Purkis, thank you very much. Well, that was a very special edition of the Daily Expresso. Thank you for watching and leave your comments below. Bye-bye for now.